From a studio high above the clouds of the Okanagan Valley, this is the Cannabis Podcast. Exploring the world of Canadian cannabis culture, one toke at a time. Now, here's your host and bud tender, Gary Johnston.
And with that introduction, let me welcome you back to another episode of the Cannabis Podcast. Thank you for coming back. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe again I misinterpreted and this is your very first time. Well, if that's the case, I welcome you to the next 30 or 40 minutes filled with information on cannabis, a plant I'm particularly passionate about, and I suspect you may have some interest too, or you probably wouldn't be here. Now, before we get too much further, let me remind you, this podcast is intended for those of legal consumption age in your jurisdiction, and is intended purely for entertainment and perhaps educational purposes. You should always consume your cannabis responsibly. In episode 171, we're going to revisit terpenes. We take a two-part dive into their complexity. We also look at the provinces taking the lead in cannabis change while the feds kind of twiddle their thumbs. There's a renewed interest in cannabis seeds, and we make number 2. That is, the Cannabis Podcast makes number 2 on the top 25 Canadian Cannabis podcasts for 2024. And we stop for some concentrates on Cultivar Corner. Pura Vida, Legacy Zombie Kush Cured Resin Jumbo Jar. Big and tasty. All of that and more on episode 171 of the Cannabis Podcast. And of course, the first thing I want to do every time we start a new episode is thank you. I'm so appreciative of the fact that you were here. I want to thank you for being a listener of the Cannabis Podcast. I truly appreciate it. And of course, I also want to thank my sponsors. Thanks to Jordana at buymeacoffee.com/cannabispodcast. If you feel so inclined, you can go there too and buy me a doobie if you like what you hear. Also, I want to thank those at Patreon. Thanks to Tony, Rob, Gage, Lloyd, Mitchell, and Roger, all my Patreons. Thank you so much for your support. I truly appreciate it. And if you ever have a comment on anything you hear on the Cannabis Podcast, please send a note to info@cannabispodcast.com. Now, let's get to our first story. And for this story, we're going to mjbizdaily.com, a story written by Kate Lavin. When Mario Guzman, the creator of Cannabis Genetics Gelato and Sunset Sherbet, travels to Europe for events, he looks forward to meeting up with longtime friends and exchanging seeds. All of our global friends come, and we share genetics and talk about what we're all planting for the year, Guzman told MJ Biz Daily during a recent phone call. He likens the experience to the seed market that has existed for decades in the coffee shops of Amsterdam. They were really the culture of it, the passionate backbone of all seed sales in Europe, Guzman said, of Amsterdam-based growers and seed breeders, adding that until the medical market got a toehold in the United States, legacy growers brought seeds from outside the United States that later became the bedrock of today's regulated market. While demand for product uniformity requires most licensed cultivators to produce marijuana from clones, growers' affinity for sharing genetics through cannabis seeds is alive and well in today's regulated market. I still get excited when I pop a 3-pack of seeds as opposed to a clone, said Justin Sheffield, director of cultivation at Bee Leaf Medical Company in Missouri. To have something new, something proprietary, something that you know your team started from seed that no one else has, that still gets us excited. Bee Leaf operates 3 cultivation facilities in Missouri with tens of thousands of plants in various stages of cultivation at any time. Nonetheless, Sheffield said, we always have a pheno hunt in the works. Reggie Harris, co-founder of Kansas City, Missouri-based cannabis genetics company House of Kush, said most of his clients are asking for good, hardy plants that aren't difficult to grow. He believes seeds have become more popular in recent years as companies have become more concerned with disease and pests in the regulated U.S. marijuana market. The thought before was that having a clone saved time from having the pheno hunt and let the plants grow out. But if you weigh the cost between potential lost crops or the extra time it takes to grow, seeds make sense, Harris said. It may take a little longer to get a new strain to market. However, the risk-reward is worth weighing. There's no question, however, that flower has to look and smell the part to keep consumers loyal to your brand, Harris said. With the number of choices out there, cultivators are looking for hits. If you can consistently deliver them, they'll keep coming back for your genetics. When it comes to what cultivators should look for when vetting potential partners for cannabis seeds, Eugene Beaucrive, head of marketing at international seed bank Fast Bud, said, detailed information about the genetic stability and quality of the seeds should be provided. He also recommended the growers ask for confirmation that seeds are tested for germination rates, reviews, including references or testimonials from other cultivators. Beaucrive told MJ Biz Daily that North American marijuana cultivators have different preferences than their European counterparts. North American growers favor genetics with high THC content for more potent flower, optimized yield, unique terpene profiles that allow for marketplace differentiation, Bucreef said, adding that resistance to disease and pests also are key priorities. European growers' priorities are a little different. They must remain compliant with stringent THC limits and local regulations. So we see a higher demand for limited THC strains as well as strains with specific medicinal properties. So there you go. Still lots of interest in cannabis seeds all around the world, and I'm sure the same applies if you talk to a bunch of growers in Canada.
From the cannabis-infused studio in the clouds, this is the Cannabis Podcast.
To thecanigma.com for our next story, this written by Jessica Riley Chevalier, and it's time that we reviewed again the common sense from terpenes. If you're new to cannabis, you may think that all weed smells the same. But once you spend some time with the plant, the nuances and complexities appear. Different strains have aromas of lemon, pepper, and even gasoline. These odors are thanks to terpenes, chemical compounds that contribute to both the smell and taste of cannabis, and perhaps certain effects of different strains as well. And if I can put in a sidebar in addition to that, that's one component of the scent. There are a number of other components, but in this one we're just dealing with the terpenes. End of sidebar. Exactly how much terpenes impact your experience and the entourage effect, the combined effect of all the chemical compounds in cannabis, is unknown. But there is some emerging evidence, and countless anecdotal reports, that terpenes indeed play an important role in the effects of cannabis. Most jurisdictions don't require cannabis companies to include the terpene profiles on labels, and many labs do not evaluate the terpene content of cannabis, but that doesn't mean it's unimportant. Learning about terpenes is a great way to understand how other ingredients in cannabis outside of THC alter its effects. Amanda Riemann, Chief Knowledge Officer at New Frontier Data, told the Canigma, terpenes have a therapeutic value on their own, and THC is just one part of the overall effect of cannabis. Terpenes may be able to help you get specific desired effects and potentially moderate the effects of cannabis. Learning how to identify terpenes by scent is a valuable skill for any cannabis consumer, and you don't have to be a connoisseur to master it. The skill allows you to identify and understand which cannabis strains may work for you and which don't, without necessarily needing the certificate of analysis. While analytical laboratory information is great to have, it's often not readily available or easy to read. But you don't need a lab test to learn how to understand your weed by sight and scent. You just need knowledge, a nose, and some practice. Why do some cannabis strains smell better than others? Well, the short answer is personal preference. Your endocannabinoid system is like your fingerprint, wholly unique to you. Similarly, our sense of smell, the olfactory system, is personal to us and closely connected to the brain's limbic system, which is important for emotions and memory. To put it simply, your life experience and memories can significantly impact how different scents affect your mood. While you can learn how to identify a multitude of terpenes, that doesn't mean they'll all smell appealing to you when combined together into cannabis products. There are a host of nuances that dictate whether or not a bud smells good to you personally. If it does, you're likely to have a better experience. If it doesn't, it's probably not the strain for you. While there are up to 200 terpenes that can occur in cannabis plants, a handful of them are most commonly encountered in modern, everyday cannabis strains. Myrcene, earthy and spicy. Beta-caryophyllene, pepper, spicy. Pinene, pine trees, woody. Ocimene, earthy, sweet. Humulene, earthy and hops. Terpinolene, floral, herbal, fuel like gas or diesel. Linalool, floral and lavender. And limonene, citrus and lemon. It takes knowledge and practice to recognize the subtleties of terpenes in cannabis, but with a little time, you can identify common terpenes in cannabis strains with nothing more than your nose. This information can help you improve and further customize your cannabis experience by finding terpene profiles that are most pleasing to your endocannabinoid system. Ways you can practice identifying terpenes. Seek out flyer strains that include the terpene profile on the package. If your local dispensary doesn't carry any products that include the terpene profile, request the testing results. Keep a consumption journal. Detail the type of cannabis you're consuming and any information you have about it. If it doesn't have a terpene profile, note what aromas you notice. By adding in the smells of the strains, you can create your own personal data log to help you dig down and determine not just what cannabinoid balances work for you, but the terpene profiles you prefer as well. Identify terpenes in nature by smelling the plants around you. Get to know the plants around you and identify which aromas smell particularly appealing. Smelling other live plants is a great way to get familiar with the terp profiles in canna and what you like, Ryman suggests. Notice the aromas in your food. Terpenes are abundant in produce, spices, and herbs. What foods smell enticing and which ones don't? Identify those odors. We eat with our eyes and noses first. Learn about scents around you and the ones that draw you in, Raymond says. Try a terpene tasting kit. Similar to a wine tasting, a terpene tasting kit is a package of terpene isolates for your sampling pleasure. These kits teach you how to identify individual terpenes by smell, or taste too if diluted, so you can better recognize them when they appear in cannabis and throughout nature. The Trichome Institute, Golden Apple, and Abstract Tech all sell terpene tasting kits. Invest in a course. If you really want to take your understanding of terpenes in cannabis as a whole to the next level, invest in a cannabis course from Gautier or Interpening. Led by plant experts, these courses will take you down to the molecular level of cannabis and back out again to give you a holistic understanding of the plant and its compounds, terpenes included. And we'll pick up part 2 of this article later on in this episode. And we got a chance to do a bit of a road trip this last weekend. Head over to Nicusp to see the kids and the grandkids. It was an opportunity for me again to go back to my vaporizer and use some of those so I'm a little more discreet when I am in that particular area. And anytime I visit Nicusp, I always want to drop into Mount Odin Cannabis. And this time, Colin, the owner, was there. So hey, Colin, if you happen to be listening, here's a big shout out to you. I really like what Colin is doing at Mount Odin Cannabis. They are open every time I have been there, so they're open every day of the week. Shorter hours, of course, realizing that they are busier in the summer, and I'm sure they must be pretty slow during the wintertime. Nicusp is a pretty tiny spot, but well curated. Colin has done a good job of curating the stock that's in the store. So if you are ever in the Nicusp area, I strongly encourage you. Well, if you like cannabis. If you don't like cannabis, you probably shouldn't go in the store. You won't be much interested. But if you are, Mount Odin Cannabis is definitely worth checking out. They're right on Broadway, which, of course, is the main street in Nicusp. And the beauty of going to Nicusp, your traffic just slows right down. We had a wonderful time walking around the city, walking around the town, and often commenting about there's no traffic. But there is a good cannabis store. So remember Mount Odin Cannabis the next time you're heading to Nicusp. And I got a nice note from Dan Humston, a member of the PodConnects network, which I joined last year, letting me know that there is a new survey out there, or a new compilation of podcasts, and the Cannabis Podcast came out at number 2. I have posted the link on the show page. You can go check it out for yourself. It is the 25 best Canadian cannabis podcasts for 2024. And at number 2, it's the Cannabis Podcast. Great to see that list. So pleased to see the show is growing and there's more interest in it. And you can find the link to this back on the show page. Woohoo! We're number 2. Of course, I don't know who created the list. And I don't know how deep it goes, which is also every time I see the Cannabis Podcast on a list, I wonder, okay, who generated that list? And how valid is it? But I'm going to accept the fact that it's at number 2, and that shows where the Cannabis Podcast is today. And I hope we're number 2, or maybe we're even number 1 in your books.
It doesn't matter how high the THC is. The entourage effect is always waiting for you here. This is the Cannabis Podcast.
To 420intel.com for our next story. This story from 420intel.com. Mike Tyson drops new boxing glove weed gummies. Heavyweight champion and cannabis entrepreneur Mike Tyson launched a new version of his weed gummies from his company Tyson 2.0, this time shaped like a boxing glove. Tyson made headlines in 2022 with his marijuana gummy shaped like an ear, a reminder of his infamous biting of Evander Holyfield's ear in a 1997 championship bout. However, because the ear-shaped gummies depict a portion of a person, they ran afoul of cannabis regulations in some markets, including Colorado, where the new boxing gloves debuted at select dispensaries on Tuesday. We first delivered the Mike Bites ear-shaped edibles, which took over the world, Tyson said. These knockout gummies represent another step in our mission to make plant-based wellness accessible to all. Whether it be through ears or gloves, I'm always looking for new ways to connect with my fans, and I think these gummies will pack a real punch in Colorado. Much like his career as a professional boxer, Tyson has become an icon of the regulated cannabis industry. His company, Tyson 2.0, launched in 2021 with a promise to provide the highest quality products in each regulated market it entered. In February, the company launched a line of cannabis seeds in partnership with Royal Queen Seeds. In addition to becoming a global cannabis brand, Tyson 2.0 has expanded into a variety of other consumer product categories, including apparel and accessories. And to date, the company has a presence in 16 countries around the world. The new Mike's Knockout Gummies edible cannabis product line, featuring unique boxing glove-shaped gummies made with full-spectrum cannabis rosin, launched exclusively in Colorado. So who knows? Will we see the boxing gloves in Canada? Time will tell. And we're picking up our next story from pressreader.com. Provinces lead on cannabis reform while the feds dither. When the Cannabis Act became law back in 2018, it was hailed by the federal Liberals as a bold move that would keep cannabis out of the hands of youth, protect public health and safety, and reduce criminal activity. The idea was that by creating a regulated industry, illicit operators would either jump on the bandwagon and go legal, or be pushed out of the market by a newly created legal sector. Some progress has been made on this front. A 2022 study by Deloitte estimated that between 2018 legalization and 2021, the industry contributed $43.5 billion towards Canada's GDP while sustaining over 150,000 jobs nationally. Despite this, almost 6 years on, the industry continues to face serious challenges, with many feeling that the federal Liberals have washed their hands of the industry they helped to create. According to Statistics Canada, the illicit market still accounts for about 35% of total sales nationally. Another recent study by Deloitte found that the average price in the illicit market remains 20% lower than in licensed stores, which deters price-conscious consumers from going legal. This poses real risks to Canadians, as revenues generated by the sale of illicit market cannabis often find their way into the pockets of organized crime. Despite this, the federal government continues to ignore the advice of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance, which in February recommended adjustments to the excise tax structure aimed at improving the ability of the legal cannabis sector to compete with an entrenched illicit market. And product from the illicit market is risky. A 2022 study by the National Research Council on behalf of the Ontario Provincial Police found that a random sampling of seized illegal cannabis contained high levels of unauthorized pesticides. Add to this the fact that many of the products they sell are packaged to look like popular junk food brands to appeal to youth, and it's clear that more work is needed. After the creation of a cannabis industry forum within the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development this past February, some industry players expressed cautious optimism about increased federal engagement, but the minister has yet to attend a meeting, signaling political indifference to an already skeptical stakeholder group. The good news is that Canadian provinces had decided to fill the void created by federal inaction and have begun taking decisive steps to help ensure the long-term viability of their legal operators. In September 2023, for example, Ontario reduced the average wholesale markup it charges licensed producers. It then doubled the number of stores a licensed retailer can operate and allocated $31 million over 3 years to fund a provincial joint forces cannabis enforcement team targeting illicit market stores and websites across the province. The Alberta government has boldly allowed licensed retailers to sell products at festivals or trade shows closed to minors, opening up another opportunity for responsible consumer engagement. In June of this year, the province announced that certain legally licensed retailers could sell private label products, usually sold at lower prices to appeal to a more cost-conscious consumer. In 2023, Manitoba eliminated a 6% levy on legal cannabis sales, which had driven prices up unnecessarily. As helpful as these provincial changes are, they cannot fully compensate for a lack of federal action. In March of this year, the recommendations of a statutory review of the Cannabis Act were released, with the federal government's expert panel confirming that the illicit cannabis market remains entrenched, and too many illicit retailers continue to operate both online and physical stores. Legitimate cannabis retailers, who are on the front lines of the fight against illegal operators, know this all too well, with more and more cannabis companies filing for bankruptcy protection in 2024. Cannabis legalization remains a cornerstone achievement of the Trudeau Liberals, but the lack of meaningful reform and engagement with the industry since legalization risks tarnishing this legacy. With a federal election on the way, there is still time for federal action to help ensure the sustainability and success of an industry they helped to create. Only time will tell if they follow the lead of their provincial counterparts. Interesting story. Highlights some interesting things that have happened in legalization since it occurred, and I think they're right. The feds seem to have washed their hands on it and are hoping it just kind of goes away, but since you opened the door, it's not going to go away.
THC, CBD, terpene profiles, what's in me? Oh, please explain to me. Cultivar Corner, Cultivar Corner, oh yeah. Cultivar Corner, please explain this stuff to me.
On Cultivar Corner today, we're taking a slightly different path. You won't be hearing me talking about rolling up a joint, taking a look at the flower seeing what the trichomes are doing in there. Although I might still be able to take a peek at something, it isn't going to have any trichomes visible to my eye. But boy, it's sure going to have some aroma. I'm confusing you, aren't I? I know I have taken the occasional detour and looked at something in relation to some concentrates. And when I went shopping this week, I decided we're going to do something different on Cultivar Corner today. I have the Puffco Proxy. Now, if you're not familiar with the Puffco Proxy, it means that I can do concentrates without having a torch. You may or may not be familiar. I do have a bit of a history with trying to use some torches and some glassware. I think if you look back at the previous episode, you'll find I tell a story of having this really nice piece of glass, getting ready to finally use it, and giving it a little tip. It fell down on my floor, and I no longer had the glass piece. So, and I also had some trouble with some of the torches I was using and trying to get them to burn, and trying to get them to burn efficiently, and to get my rig to the state that I wanted it to be. And I realized at that stage that kind of minutia in terms of the stuff we're doing to get high, I don't want to go there. And of course, when we're talking about concentrates, we're talking about getting something really high THC, so I'm going to get a big burst of that, and I'm probably going to feel it a little faster and a little harder than what I would with some standard cannabis. By way of explanation, what are we doing today? We're doing Pura Vida Legacy Zombie Kush Cured Resin Jumbo Jar. Now, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Now, the jumbo jar means it's 1.2 grams. Not just 1 gram, 1.2 grams. And the Zombie Kush Cured Resin Jumbo Jar, so the cured resin, meaning they put this through processing after they've already dried and cured the plant, as opposed to live, where it means it goes fresh, frozen, as soon as the plant gets harvested. So there is a bit of change to this one, but I'm quite liking it. My THC is sitting at 79.1%. Now, that's the key with doing concentrates. That THC is way up there compared to the 20 or 30 or 29% we might be getting in some of our flower these days. To get up into those high ranges, we need to get into the concentrates. So, as I say, this is a cured resin. So, a resin is done through a concentrate process, an extraction process, as opposed to rosin, where it's going to be heat and press. Oh, and let me give you some description of what I've got in front of me here. This is the Zombie Kush. My THC, as I say, it's 79.1%, and my terpenes are sitting at 8.1%. And boy, when you open the jar, you really get a smell of that. Caryophyllene, highest at 2.5, limonene at 1.8, and myrcene at 0.8. I have a sneaking suspicion this could be an indica. And here I am again, trying it first thing in the morning. I never learned my lesson, do I? Okay, let's get down to it. My first disappointment, and I like to share my disappointments with you, was when I went to the homepage for Pura Vida Legacy to see if I could get some information on Zombie Kush Cured Resin Jumbo Jar. I can't. I have put the link to Pura Vida on the show page. You can check it out for yourself. There's lots of detail there, but nothing on the extracts. So I guess they're a little bit behind in updating their website because I can't find anything in terms of the Pura Vida cured resin on their website. So I went to another source to see if I could find some other information. This is in fact the OCS, the Ontario Cannabis Store, and their presence for Zombie. So introducing the Pura Vida Legacy Zombie Kush Cured Resin Jumbo Jar. Expertly cured resin made from whole dried bud to capture the most captivating flavors and intense aromas. We're bringing you Zombie Kush, a cross of the Citral and Bubba Kush strains with lavender and earthy aromas and a unique taste. Licensed producer is Heritage Cannabis West Corporation. Pura Vida is the brand, potency very strong, and there's my answer, yes, indica dominant. Citral and Bubba Kush, and the extraction process, it did use some butane, which of course was all purged off afterwards. Oh, just when you got 7% terpenes, the smell is just astounding coming out of this little jar. So, the Puffco. This is a way for me to do my concentrates without getting out a torch and burning myself, although I occasionally have touched this and burned the top of my finger. It has a little place to put your concentrates, so I'm going to dip into my Pura Vida Zombie Kush cured resin jar with my little dab tool, and I'm going to take a bit of a mix. So what I've got here is it's a little soupy, so it's almost like some diamonds and sauce is what I've got in here. There's a bit of crystallization going on, and also a lot of soupiness. So I'm just going to take some of that sauce. I'm going to take probably, if I was to describe how much, it's probably about maybe 2 grains of rice. It's always difficult to determine exactly how much you're putting in that. But that's what I'm putting in, about 2 grains of rice. Zombie Kush cured resin, my Puffco, 4 different temperature settings on the Puffco. And let me start at the beginning. We're going to start with the blue. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way up after each hit. So the lowest setting, this is what we're going to do. Let me get it going. I gave it 2 starts. And now I'm waiting for my Puffco, which is a really cool, it's like a little Sherlock pipe. Little piece of glass with all the electronics stuck inside of that glass. And this little concentrate bowl, I guess, would be the best way to describe it, which you put a little bit of lid over. And then as soon as this is ready, it's going to make a... And there we go. It tells me it's ready. And here we go. This is Pura Vida Legacy Zombie Kush Cured Resin. Oh, that tastes so good. Oh, the taste that comes out of concentrates, astounding. Now let's bump up I'm going to bump up the temperature now. Then we go up to my next setting, which is going to be green. So there's lots of flavor in that one. And now I am at the second setting. Oh, and more of and I'm not sure what the taste here is. So more of the fruity nature, perhaps. More of the terpenes I'm picking up as I pump my temperature up. Oh, boy. And we have already talked about the fact that the reason that we look at concentrates is because of the higher concentration of THC, so that we can get a sudden burst compared to how we would normally smoke it. Oh, okay, now that was the green. Then I probably shouldn't be going to the next one, but I am. I'm going to the red. And what have I got in there? I've still got some. It's still vibrant in color. So here we go. Oh my goodness sakes, my head is already exploding. All right, I turned up into the red, and now it's starting to get a little too hot. I would probably go with the blue and the green settings. I realized as I was listening to the description of using the temperatures by color, with no further explanation, it probably was a little scant in telling you actually what that meant. So let me explain. The Puffco Peak Vaporizer, when I mentioned blue, that's going to be 450 degrees Fahrenheit, the most flavored, the lowest vapor production. Green is 500 Fahrenheit. It's a balanced flavor and vapor. Red, 550 Fahrenheit, high vapor with good flavor. And white, which I don't think we got to, 600 degrees Fahrenheit, the highest vapor for bigger dabs. And the bigger dabs would probably hurt my throat more, so I don't know I'll go there too much. I hope that explanation helps. Now, interesting, on the OCS site, oh my goodness sakes, they list the THC range from 79 to 83%, and yet, no, and I'm at 79.1, so pretty close to the range. Oh my head is just a swimming right now. Oh, happy eyes? You want some happy eyes? Have some concentrate in the morning. Oh, my. Happy eyes are there. Ah, nice, comfortable high. Moving into a body stone, really strong, bang, smack you in the face when your face may not even be ready. And I don't know that I need to put any more into that. And that, of course, is also the beauty of concentrates. Just do as much as you need and then just roll with it. Really happy with the Puffco Proxy. I did make the mistake when I first got the Puffco. I was using it fairly frequently and not cleaning it. And then the first day I pulled it out, oh my. I had a trail of resin running down from the top of the Puffco piece that slips into the little pipe. It took me a long time to get it open and to get it all clean. So I have learned now. After I'm finished with this, I'm going to give that a little wipe with my Q-tip, put a little isopropyl in there and clean it all up and get it back to almost like it was never used before. And I think you can also tell by the fact that I'm rambling a little bit here. Why I haven't done this before, I don't know. It may be time to check out some other concentrates and put them through the Puffco as part of Cultivar Corner. This is a fabulous start to my day. I'm glad I went down this path. And Pura Vida, again, the only negative I'm putting out there right now is that your website doesn't tell me anything about Zombie Kush. In fact, if you go to your website, it's as if you haven't created anything called Zombie Kush, because I can't find anything there. But that's a minor disappointment. The Kush itself, the cured resin, not disappointing. I am just flying here. And as you saw, that was like with 4, well, I guess you didn't see it. As you heard, that was like with 4 hits. And now I have to follow up on myself and clean out the bowl of that. Oh, my goodness sakes. Pura Vida, Legacy, Zombie Kush, and also a new trend, 1.2 grams. This has just got so much sauce and like diamond-like crust structures in there. Oh, and it's 1.2 grams. It's going to take me a day or two to go through that. I hope. Pura Vida, Legacy, Zombie Kush, cured resin jumbo jar through the Puffco Proxy. Oh, this is going to be one fine day. And as I am wont to, after a period of time, when I have just been sitting back, reveling in the feel of this high, this... Those of you who use concentrates on a regular basis already know this, and I'm speaking to the choir, or preaching to the choir, I guess is the term. Wow. This is the first time, in all honesty, that I have started my day with some of the concentrates, and wow. It's going to be a fun day.
Sharing stories about good weed while trying good weed. This is the Cannabis Podcast.
And back to our article from Canigma.com on terpenes and how they impact your enjoyment of cannabis. We start off now with identifying cannabis scents from everyday life. There is plenty of overlap between the scents in your everyday life and the recognizable scents in cannabis. Some scents are heavily attributed to a single terpene, but most are made from a blend of several different compounds. Citrus. If you've eaten lemons, limes, or oranges, you've come into contact with limonene. This terpene is found in the rinds of citrus fruits and is a common secondary terpene in many cannabis strains. Floral. Floral aromas come from a few different terpenes, including ocimene and linalool. Linalool's floral aroma is easily recognizable for anyone who's been around lavender plants, while ocimine's aroma has more of an earthy base to the floral scent. Fuel, diesel or gas. The gasoline-like smell of some strains may be confusing to a new cannabis consumer. What terpene could possibly be responsible for making a plant smell like fuel? Terpinolene is often described as smelling gassy or similar to fuel, but it can also be a combination of terpenes. Pine. Pine scents come from, you guessed it, pinene. Pinene is the most abundant terpene in the world, found in coniferous trees among other plants across the globe. If you have a real Christmas tree in your house, you're filling your space with pinene. Earthy. An earthy scent is common in cannabis because it can come from a variety of terpenes including myrcene, ocimene, and humulene. Since myrcene is the most common terpene found in North America and European varieties, you've likely smoked or eaten this terpene in your weed before. Spicy. While spicy scents can come from many terpenes in nature, in cannabis it's usually due to the presence of beta-caryophyllene. Also found in black pepper and cinnamon, BCP has a distinctly spicy note. Coffee. The same compound that can produce a skunky smell in cannabis also contributes to the sharp, acidic scent of coffee. Chocolate. While cannabis with a chocolate aroma is rare, there are a few strains with delicious cocoa undertones. Benzaldehyde and trimethylpyrazine, compounds formed when cannabis is smoked, can contribute to the joint smelling like a cup of joe with coffee, burnt sugar, or nutty aromas. Volatile sulfur compounds. Terpenes are not the only chemical compound responsible for the aroma of plants. Another source of odor in the natural world is volatile sulfur compounds, or VSC for short. You're likely familiar with VSC in your everyday life, like the tang in raw onion or garlic, but these compounds can also contribute to cannabis scents. Cheese. If you've come across cheesy smell strains before, you can thank the VSC methylthiobutyate, which has a cheesy, musty smell. And skunk. Love it or hate it, the skunky smell of cannabis is unmistakable. A 2021 study identified a VCS called 3-methyl-2-butane-1-thiol, or prenylthiol, that's responsible for the iconic smell. Terpenes make up the largest and most diverse class of naturally occurring compounds known to science. Terpenes can be found all over nature, and in particular are found in plants and insects all over the world. They serve specific purposes across the plant kingdom, such as attracting pollinators, deterring predators, and protecting plants from the elements. They are often biologically active compounds too, meaning that when they are consumed or used by people or animals, they have a psychological effect. There are thousands of different terpenes in the world and hundreds in the cannabis plant, but some are more common than others. And thanks to the Canigma.com for that excellent write-up. That was part 2 of the Story of Terpenes by Jessica Riley Chevalier. And as we find ourselves approaching the end of another episode, guess what? It's time to put a chuckle on your face, or at least make you think a little bit. Because I realize as we made this switch to some of these quotes, they're not necessarily humorous, but I think they will put a smile on your face nonetheless. And here's what we got today, and again, these are coming from letslearnlanguage.com. Smoking weed is like playing a game of chess. It requires strategic thinking, patience, and the ability to anticipate your opponent's moves. Marijuana is like a paintbrush. It allows you to create beautiful, intricate works of art both inside and outside your mind. I like that one. Getting stoned on marijuana is like going on a wild adventure. It takes you to unexpected places and leaves you with unforgettable memories. Marijuana is like a time machine. It can transport you to the past or future and give you a fresh perspective on the present. And one final one, smoking weed is like solving a puzzle. It challenges your mind and helps you see things from different angles. And I like those thoughts. If you want to share your thoughts, you're welcome to. Or if you ever have any other thoughts on things you hear on the Cannabis Podcast, please send a note to info@cannabispodcast.com. And from the guy in the clouds, that's it for episode 171 of the Cannabis Podcast.
From the cannabis-infused studio, high above the Okanagan Valley, this was the Cannabis Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to podconnects.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
Cannabis Health Radio is a podcast about stories from people around the world who have used cannabis to deal with serious ailments, many of them life-threatening. My name is Ian Jessup. My co-host Corey Yelland is no stranger to the devastating emotional impact faced by so many people receiving a death sentence diagnosis from a doctor. Told she only had months to live with anal canal cancer, Corey researched and immediately began using cannabis oil to eliminate her cancer and has been cancer-free for more than a decade. She told herself that if it worked, she would spend the rest of her life helping others, which she does tirelessly every day. When you listen to our podcast, you'll hear many stories like Corey's, along with others who have used cannabis oil for many more ailments besides cancer, such as chronic pain, PTSD, MS, and many, many more. As one of our guests said, "Your podcast gave me the confidence to save my own life." We regularly get messages from listeners who have heard our podcast and use cannabis to solve a serious health issue of their own or that of a loved one. We hope you listen to these stories and be as inspired and moved as we are with each and every episode.